The galaxy was dying, and everyone knew it. For decades, the Galactic Concord, a grand alliance of 38 alien species, had stood as a symbol of peace and unity. They built cities among the stars, shared knowledge across light years, and believed that through diplomacy and understanding, all things could be solved. But that belief had shattered the moment the Vrax horde arrived. The Vrax did not speak, negotiate, or answer messages. They simply attacked, consuming world after world with brutal speed. Their ships were dark and silent, their weapons beyond anything the Concord had faced. Entire planets had gone dark, their populations vanished or destroyed. The Concord fleets had fought bravely, but every battle was another loss. Hope thinned with each passing day. On Calax Prime, the heart of the Concord, an emergency council was called. Leaders from across the stars gathered in silence, their faces grim and tired. Among them stood Admiral Corral of the Talari, a tall, scaled being known for calm judgment and years of service. But even he looked shaken. The Vrax had broken through the final defense ring, and nothing stood between them and the central worlds. There was no strategy left, no reinforcements, no clever plan. As arguments echoed through the council chamber, a quiet voice spoke a name none had dared to mention in 100 years: the Terrans, the humans. A wave of silence fell. Everyone knew the stories. A century ago, during a border conflict, the humans had acted with ruthless precision, using tactics the Conquered considered unthinkable. Though they had won, the humans had been exiled, labeled too dangerous, too aggressive, and too unpredictable. The Conquered had promised never to deal with them again. But now, that promise stood in the way of survival. "They are monsters," one council member whispered. "Yes," someone else replied, "but they're monsters who win." The debate was long, painful, and filled with fear, not just of the Vrax, but of what the humans might ask in return. Still, it was Admiral Corral who finally spoke what many were thinking. "We have no other choice," he said quietly. "Either we die trying to save our pride, or we survive by asking help from the one species that knows how to win at any cost." A vote was held, and with heavy hearts, the council agreed. A single stealth ship was ordered to find the Terrans, their last known coordinates buried deep in a forgotten system near the Orion Rift. No one knew if the humans were still alive, or if they would even answer. Some believed they had destroyed themselves long ago. Others whispered that the Terrans had simply chosen to disappear, watching the galaxy from the shadows. Whatever the truth, the Concord was about to find out. As the ship prepared for launch, Coral stood alone on the observation deck, watching distant stars flicker like dying candles. He thought of the millions already lost, the cities turned to dust, the voices gone silent forever. Then he thought of the humans, not as enemies, but as a force of nature, unpredictable and fierce. He didn't know if asking for their help would save the galaxy or end it faster. But in the face of certain destruction, he knew one thing for sure: they had no other choice. Somewhere out there, the most feared species in the galaxy still lived. And now, the galaxy would need them, once again. The ship named Silent Grace moved like a shadow through deep space, silent and almost invisible. Its mission was dangerous and uncertain: find Earth, contact the humans, and ask for their help. It had been over 90 years since anyone had heard from the Terrans. Most in the Concord believed they had destroyed themselves in war or vanished into the dark corners of space. But now, with the Vrax horde closing in, the Concord was willing to risk anything. As the Silent Grace approached the Orion Rift, strange signals filled the air. What they found was beyond anything the crew expected. Earth was not only alive, it was powerful. A giant energy barrier surrounded the planet, stretching far beyond its moon, glowing like a silent warning. Advanced satellites floated in perfect, Formation and massive defense platforms drifted like silent guardians. The planet itself looked untouched, almost peaceful, but the feeling was clear. Humans were watching, and they were ready. When the conquered ship hailed Earth, there was no answer at first. Then, after a long silence, a voice replied, calm and firm. "You were told never to return," it said. "Why are you here now?" The crew explained everything about the war, the Vraks, the fallen worlds, and the conquered's last hope. Hours passed. Then came the answer. Earth would allow one diplomatic shuttle to land. No weapons, no lies. Inside the human meeting chamber, the crew met Commander Alara Voss. She looked human, but her presence was sharp, commanding, and unlike anything the Concord officers had experienced before. She listened without emotion as they explained the situation. When they finished, she didn't speak for a long time. Then she said, "We warned you." Her voice was not angry, but cold and clear. "You feared us, you exiled us, and now because you are losing, you come to us for help." The crew apologized, but Alara didn't care for apologies. "You want us to fight your war?" she asked. "Then we fight our way." She demanded full control of any operations, no oversight, no questions. The Concord would give humans whatever resources they needed, but stay out of their way. She made it clear that if the humans joined, they would not ask for permission, they would act. Her final words stayed with every soul in that room. "If we come, we win. But don't expect to like how we do it." There was no time to argue. The war was nearly lost. The Silent Grace returned to Calax Prime with the message, and the Conquered Council, with heavy hearts, agreed to the terms. Many were afraid of what the humans might become once given full power again, but fear of extinction was stronger. As word spread that the Terrans were returning, many species remembered old stories, of battles won with impossible tactics, of human soldiers who never surrendered, and of strategies that broke every rule but ended wars. For better or worse, the most dangerous species in the galaxy had been called back. As Earth's ships began to move, silent and dark like predators in the void, a single thought echoed across the stars. The humans were coming, not as allies of peace, but as weapons of survival. And no one knew what the galaxy would look like when they were done. When the Terran fleets finally appeared at the edge of conquered space, they arrived without announcement. No grand speeches, no ceremony, just silence and shadows. Their ships were dark and sharp-edged, built not for defense, but for domination. From the first moment, it was clear the humans had not come to follow the Conquered's methods. They had come to win. Within days, their tactics shook the entire war front. While the Conquered still used formation strategies and predictable responses, the Terrans fought like predators in a jungle, striking from the dark, vanishing before anyone could react. Human warships bypassed entire fleets by warping through micro-rifts, appearing behind enemy lines and crippling supply chains in hours. Their soldiers, known only as ghosts in steel, dropped silently from orbit in black armor that seemed to melt into the battlefield. These shock troopers moved with terrifying precision, striking hard, disappearing just as fast, leaving nothing but wreckage and confused survivors behind. The Vraks, known for their brute force and hive-like coordination, found their systems hacked mid-battle. Communications failed. Weapons stopped working. Entire fleets turned against themselves as human code twisted their targeting systems. But it didn't stop there. Humans began to weaponize everything. On the moons of Alvarez, they used seismic pulses to trigger volcanic eruptions that buried enemy bunkers. Near the black hole of Orinth's Reach, they lured a Vrax dreadnought into gravitational collapse. Worst of all, they engineered a virus that only targeted the Vrax's cloned nerve systems, spreading confusion through their ranks without a single shot. Conquered commanders were both amazed and horrified. To them, war had rules: honor, defense, restraint. The humans had no such limits. They studied the enemy, learned what scared them, and used it without mercy. Across the front lines, alien soldiers spoke in whispers of the Terrans. They said the humans didn't fear death, that they had mastered it. Some even claimed that the humans enjoyed the chaos of war, that they were born for it. And for the first time since the war began, the Vraks faltered. Fear, a concept once unknown to the Vraks, began to creep into their formations. Scouts reported hesitation. Attacks slowed. Retreats happened. The Vraks, once unstoppable, were starting to break. But even as the tide turned, new problems arose. Within the Concord Council, leaders began to argue not about defeat, but about the cost of victory. What kind of galaxy would be left after the humans were done? Some feared they had traded one unstoppable force for another. Even Admiral Corral, who had once voted to summon the Terrans, began to question the decision. He watched the reports of destroyed worlds, of entire Vrax colonies turned into experiments, of moral lines being crossed like they were never there. Humanity's strength was undeniable, but it came with a shadow. The conquered had always valued unity, fairness, diplomacy. The humans valued survival, and they would burn anything that stood in their way. Yet, despite all the doubts, one fact remained clear. The war was no longer a losing battle. For the first time in years, there was hope. But it came wrapped in darkness, and no one could say what price they would pay for it. As the Terran fleets pushed deeper into Vrax space, only one thing was certain: the wolves had been unleashed, and they were not stopping. The end came not with celebration, but with silence. The humans, after months of relentless strikes, launched their final assault on the Vrax homeworld, an operation so bold that even the most seasoned Concord generals doubted it could succeed. The Terrans didn't hesitate. They used stealth technology to bypass orbital defenses, unleashed EMP storms, to blind sensors, and struck the heart of the planet with unmatched precision. Entire command centers collapsed before the Vrax even understood what was happening. But it wasn't just a military operation. It was a storm that swallowed everything. In the chaos, orbital bombardments targeted key facilities, but the resulting chain reactions triggered massive environmental collapse. The planet's core began to destabilize, and with it, the atmosphere cracked. Firestorms raged across continents. Oceans boiled. In a matter of days, the once living world turned into a scorched, empty shell. The Vrax leadership was gone, their war machine shattered. The war was over, but the cost was unbearable. Billions had died, not all of them soldiers. Among the casualties were millions of those forced to serve the Vrax against their will. Scientists, workers, even children bred into servitude. When news reached the conquered, celebration turned to horror. Protests broke out across member worlds. Leaders who had voted to bring the humans in now faced angry voices demanding justice. The very species that had saved the galaxy was once again being called a threat. At the heart of the storm, Commander Ilara Voss stood before the conquered council. She showed no emotion, no regret, only truth. Her voice was calm, firm, and sharp, like glass. She didn't offer excuses. "You brought us in to do what you couldn't," she said, looking each delegate in the eye. "We did it. Now live with it." Her words cut through the noise like a blade. Some tried to argue, claiming that the humans had gone too far, that such destruction was never agreed upon. But she silenced them with a single answer. "You asked us to win. We did." She didn't deny the loss of life, nor did she celebrate the victory. She simply told them that this was the cost of survival, and that while humanity had carried the weight, it was the Concord who had placed it in their hands. Then, without waiting for permission or applause, she announced humanity's withdrawal. Earth's fleets would return home. The war was over, and the humans would no longer interfere. But as she turned to leave, she gave one final warning. Her voice colder than the vacuum of space. "If the galaxy calls again, we'll answer. Just pray it never has to." And with that, she was gone. Across conquered space, the protests slowly faded, replaced by silence and uncertainty. The war had ended because of the Terrans, but peace came with shadows. Some viewed the humans as saviors. Others saw them as a new threat waiting in the dark. Yet no one could deny the truth. They had done what no one else could. They had stopped the unstoppable. They had paid the price no one else was willing to pay. And now they had returned to their isolated worlds, taking their silence with them. But the memory of their power remained, like a storm cloud waiting just beyond the stars. The galaxy had been saved, but the fear of the Terrans would never fade, because everyone now understood one simple truth. If the humans return, it means something worse has arrived. The war had ended, but its shadow remained. With the Vraks crushed and their empire reduced to ashes, the Terran fleets disappeared as quietly as they had arrived. They returned to the deep silence of their own space, behind energy barriers and distant stars, offering no statements, no celebration, and no promises. They had done what was asked, and now they wanted no part in rebuilding what they had saved. The Concord, though still standing, had changed forever. On military worlds and training stations, young alien officers began to study Terran strategies. Once banned, now quietly accepted. They examined the bold flanking maneuvers, the use of fear and silence, the way humans had turned every piece of the battlefield into a weapon. Across the Concord, political lines shifted, old alliances weakened, and new ones formed based not on trust, but on the quiet question: what if the humans return? Some feared the Terrans would one day come again, not as allies, but as rulers. Others believed they would be the galaxy's only shield against threats still lurking beyond known space. Rumors grew about ancient forces stirring in the void, far past the edge of the star charts, and more than one voice whispered that the Vraks might not have been the worst enemy the galaxy could face. In the center of Calax Prime, a monument stood in the plaza outside the Concord Council Hall. Built of dark alloy and stone, it was a simple, strong structure. No statues, no names, no symbols of glory. Just a single line etched deep into the iron surface, its words chosen carefully, never forgotten. When all else failed, we stood alone, and they came. Admiral Corral often visited it in silence, his thoughts heavy but calm. He remembered the day they voted to call the Terrans, the fear that had filled the room, and the silence that followed. He had once feared the humans, like so many others. Now he feared what might have happened if they hadn't come. Behind him, life in the galaxy tried to move forward. Trade routes reopened. Refugees returned to rebuild. Peace returned, but it was not the same peace they had known before. It was a peace that came with a cost, shaped by fear, loss, and a quiet respect for a species no one could fully understand. The name human no longer meant just aggression or danger. It meant survival. It meant doing what had to be done when no one else could. The Conquered had once believed humanity was their last resort, but now they understood something far more important. Humanity was not the last resort. They were the line. The final line that stood when everything else broke. And beyond that line, only darkness waited. Some nights, Corral would look to the stars and wonder what the humans were doing. Were they watching? Preparing? Or simply waiting in silence? Ready to rise again if the galaxy ever called for them? He didn't know. No one did. But one thing had become clear to all. If that day ever came again, the galaxy would not need speeches or votes. They would look toward Earth, not with pride or anger, but with hope, and maybe a little fear. Because the Terrans had proven something no one could forget. When the end comes and the stars begin to fall, it will be the humans who rise.